Thank you for joining today for webinar. It's meant for small and medium-sized business owners. What you need to know about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity in general, it's a big field and there's no way we can cover everything. But hopefully in this information-packed webinar, we'll give you some ideas how you can improve your cybersecurity posture and what it is even. So just briefly about myself, I'm a founder of itsecuro.com. We are securing web applications used by global 200 global companies. And we have a lot of expertise with protecting web applications. itsecuro mission in general, it's to protect, to make a cyber world a safer place. It's a big mission. It's probably never achievable mission, but we are going through that. And part of it is through educations, through webinars like this. Just for you to know that all the network firewalls exposed directly to internet are constantly scanned. So every few seconds, we receive a request for UIP, testing some service, network firewall blocks it, and if you look at the log for network firewall, you'll see constant stream of malicious requests. And hackers, they're just only one of cyber threats. It could be equipment failure, it could be internal threats in your organization, and depends how big it is. But in general, you need to understand internet offers a lot of benefits, but it also gives reach to malicious people to come very close to your digital assets. And they keep watching you, your assets, how vulnerable they are and what they can steal, and without even you knowing about it. As a rule, if a service, whether it's a website, web application, mail, FTP, is open to public internet, then it's going to be attacked. It's an extremely rare occasion when, for some reason, a service is open to public internet and hackers didn't discover it yet. Their discovery rate is very quick. So if you open anything to public internet, usually it takes just a couple of minutes until they discover and start bombarding it. It's that bad online. The aim of information security can be referred to CIA triad. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three main components. I'll not explain about other couple which exist, but for your understanding, availability is data or asset, digital asset is available. It's working and supporting your business operations. Confidentiality, who has access to access that information. And integrity, who can change that data. So all information security in a way can come down to these three. And in other words, you can explain it is to reduce risk of data availability incidents, authorize access to confidential data. You can say it differently, to protect information systems that support the operations and assets, and to ensure the safety and privacy of critical data such as customer accounts, details, financial data, or intellectual property. It still comes down to those three: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Information security promised to the business that any investment in information security will cost much less than recovery costs after security incidents. If you ignore the risk management altogether, because you're too busy, you're a small business owner, you have a business risks, whether your business will survive or not, whether you have a bandwidth to manage cyber risks as well. It's very challenging for business owners, especially small business owners, to address cybersecurity in any way. And if you ignore those risks, not that they disappear. They actually don't disappear anywhere. You just accept the risk as they are, because you have a greater risks in business. Your business maybe have a more marketing issues than anything. But what if one of the critical digital assets fails and stop working for you? Whether it will be some web applications or some website, like for how long can it be down? And if you calculate for those events ahead and prepare for them, you minimize those risks. And if you're not prepared, well, anything can happen. And after some incidents like ransomware attacks, it's not clear whether your business or organization can recover at all. And some of the damages could be reputational damages, which are hard to measure even. So first, you need to establish risk governance and organizational risk appetite. What is your organizational risk appetite? Is it high? Is it low? Can you accept any risks? Or not? Or medium risk acceptance you can have? So, and you decided for yourself, like, because with that appetite also comes the costs. Security is always a balance between cost and risk and convenience as well. So, for example, in the risk management, what if computer system fails? How bad is that for your organization? What if data is lost? Completely lost, the digital assets just failed completely and you don't have a backup, so data is lost completely. Can your organization survive and recover from this? What if a ransomware attack happens? What if hackers got access to the data? What if financial and reputation impact of failed computers, assets, lost data stolen by hackers? So all of these risks and many more need to go to a risk register. That's where you start. It's and a lot of small businesses, once again, they don't have a formal risk management. They just make decisions on the go. It's very different for big organizations where there's a risk assessments. It's a very formal process of treating the risks, because the risks could be much larger as well. For small businesses, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, but certain things you still need to think. And in terms of preparation for any event occurring, if you prepared, it's easier to handle it. And sometimes it just needs identifying that you don't have backups for the system. Do a backup, and it could be super cost effective. The fact that you're a small business and you're struggling to survive, it doesn't mean that you can ignore some risks, because some risks are too big to be ignored, and your organization might not survive if such event occurs. Big organizations, they have a formal risk management frameworks where you look at loss magnitude, how big of magnitude of event, what is, there is a primary loss, secondary loss, and how frequently this kind of event happens, of lost event happens. And that depends on threat event frequency and vulnerability. So this is a little bit more complex for, at least for medium and big organizations. But from this framework, you just need to understand loss magnitude, what is the risk, and how frequently it's can happen. There are other cybersecurity frameworks, not only for risk management, but in general about cybersecurity, implementing it. ISO 27001, SOC 2, NIST, and so forth. So there are many frameworks that are very helpful to choose one which most suited and start implementing slowly, because the security is a journey and you just need to start it. Doesn't matter how small your efforts are, because they produce results. Even small efforts, like you get ready for anything to happen. Policy manual, that's your policy for your employees to use. Whether it's a password policy, acceptable use policy, and this is the framework for your organization. Of course, the small organizations with a few staff, they don't have a IT even on staff sometimes, and never mind security experts on staff. So it's all costs. Yet some things you can start if you engage with some help. You can get some manuals fairly easy, because disaster recovery could happen without whether you prepare or not with it or not. And data classification, it's also let your employees know how sensitive certain data. And those policies, you can have as many policies as you like. There are some policies are required by certain security frameworks that you have them. But really, if you have something in mind, it's one thing. But if you write it, it becomes different. It actually becomes more solid and more objective. And you educate your employees about your policies. Risk heat map and risk register. In a way, once you come up with the different risks your organization could have, whether it's lost data and system not working, accounts compromised, you can put it on a heat map. What's the likelihood of this event occurring? And what's the impact? It's the same as we looked at a FAIR framework before. So impact of event occurring and how often would it occur? There is a inherent risk and the residual risk. Inherent risk, that's when you have a risk without you doing anything to mitigate that risk. It's inherited in situation. So for example, data lost, when you lost customer data through social engineering attacks where employees divulge information. So one of your employees was not trained and they got tricked by hackers through social engineering. It's basically tricking your employees. And they just gave information to hackers through social element. So, and you can see on the top DL, data lost. And you can see likelihood of such event occurring very high, because it's social engineering attacks through phishing and phone calls. They're happening. It's there are a lot of people, malicious people, trying to make use of it, and impact is pretty big. It's probably the biggest impact when your employee just handles the data to hacker. If you train the employees, you can reduce likelihood of this event happening. Impact doesn't change. If they leak information, give it to hackers, it's still as bad, but likelihood will reduce dramatically if you do some training to them. How to treat data through data classification, first of all, because your helpers need to know how sensitive certain data is. And then how not to get tricked by social engineering. To create a data classification, you basically audit all your data and see what kind of data do you have. You have financial information, you have HR information, you have some intellectual property, whatever data you have, you can classify it into public, internal, confidential, highly confidential. Full-level classification is probably good for most of organizations. You can have as many levels as you want, as long as it's clear for you what the difference is. Public sector has even 16 different classifications. So public information, in this case, it would be your marketing brochure, job advertisements, anything clearly meant for the public. Internal information is general information meant to stay inside your organization, whether it's a routine correspondence, some internal policies, and so forth. Confidential information, it's already more sensitive, and leakage of this information will cause more damage to the organization. And you can see whether you have a customer leads, you have a software code, and you need to assess your data and classify it. And highly confidential or secret classification is definitely for most sensitive data where only certain individuals, not even departments, but certain individuals have access, and they're authorized to have that access. For your employees to stay safe, there are different measures needs to be implemented on their laptop and also their training to prepare them for whatever happens. That would include have backup and equipment redundancy, to keep all your software up to date, use password manager or enable two-factor authentication. All those different measures comes, of course, after risk management, and there are different scales of organizations, of course. When you have 100,000 employees, and one of those measures would cost you 500,000, just like that, because you decided. And then already, if you're talking about such a big scale, you need to do your fair analysis of risks and benefits. Is it worthwhile spending this money? What's the benefits of it? What's the likelihood of event and loss magnitude? So, but there are many different measures in cybersecurity in general can be implemented, but it also depends on your assets. What kind of information assets do you have? Do you have only laptops in your organizations? And you use third-party web applications, cloud applications? Or do you own a server? You maintain a server? As soon as you start maintaining a server, which open to public internet, well, you need to have a right protection in place for your server because it's going to be attacked. So whether you use some technologies like VPN to reduce your attack surface, so all of those needs to be considered. And of course, there is a use of encryption in storage, in transit for data to transfer, social engineering, spam, and all of those areas, it is maturity. It's a matter of maturity in different, for example, disaster recovery. How mature is the organization to recover from any event? Or access control? Do you have a good authentication? Can you improve it? Maybe you have a single sign-on attached to it. So physical security, network security, and all of those areas, security awareness, can be in different level of maturity of your program. That's how you measure your preparedness in a way, because there is no limit for information security. Big organizations, they have millions to spend in information security, but small companies, they don't. But it doesn't mean that small organizations shouldn't start addressing it, because even a small investments into backups or small cybersecurity protection can be beneficial depending on your risk. Disaster recovery, it's one of the main one for me, because it's not only about hackers, it's also your assets failures and ransomware recovery. So a lot depends on the last level of defense, which is disaster recovery. Disaster recovery initiated only in extreme reasons when it's needed. And it's already when you fail to protect your assets and they're not working or ransomware attack got hold of it. So you should be able to recover from your backups. And you need to determine for your organization, what's the recovery time objective? It's a maximum about time it should take to recover from disaster. So different assets in your organizations have a different sensitivity. Look at your assets and see how critical they are. How much downtime can you afford? Is it a couple of hours? Is it a couple of days? Recovery point objective. How much data can we lose between backups? So first of all, you need to have a regular data backups. And if data changes quickly, and it's a lot of work to restore the data, you need to do backup more often. And for some organizations, data doesn't change as quickly. And to recover 1 week of changes, it doesn't take too much energy. And all those factors need to go into determining this major recovery time objective and recovery point objective. There are different strategies for backup. One of the strategies is 3-to-1 backup strategy. All of this, of course, it's already details about your disaster recovery. At the top level, you need to determine your RTO, RPO. And then your technical staff can decide on the strategy, how they do backup. Yet a business need to determine some things, what's their tolerance for this. And whether can you do it with manual backups, have you need to automate it, and your technical staff and helpers can determine that. It's no problem. But business leaders, they need to understand certain things in information security and ask your technical team, how ready are you for disaster recovery? How long would it take you to recover these assets? Don't imagine that if you as a business owner don't ask about it, everything is covered. Just ask. Conversation is always good. And do you have a spare equipment in case something fails, whether it's your network switch or your wireless access point or your laptop or your server? So even a power supply for critical laptop is critical, because your computer cannot function, and some people cannot function without their computer either. So one of the frameworks is NIST cybersecurity framework, where you first identify your assets. You identify your business requirements, governance, risk management strategy. Then you implement certain protection, awareness, security awareness, and training, data security, whether it's encryption methods and all the protective technologies for network security, for host security. Next level is to detect. What if you fail to protect your assets? How would you detect that they got compromised? Look for anomalies and events. It's basically about security continuous monitoring and detection process, whether it's a detection on network or on hosts. If you detect some malicious activities and anomalies, you can respond and you can analyze it and try to mitigate and try to do improvements, secure, and it really depends on incident, what's happened, how you respond to it. And you better have plan in place, how you're gonna respond to it. It's a incident response policy, should cover it. And if you have to initiate disaster recovery, that's the last step. As we talked about disaster recovery before, and to communicate all the stakeholders about it. Access control. Only authorized people need to have access to confidential and highly confidential data, or even internal. You don't want internal data to leak to a public. And depending on data classification, it could be role-based. It's enough that a person works in a sales department for him to get access to leads, for example, to do his job. Or need-to-know basis. So it's not only he works in sales department, but actually he has a job need to know certain information. And how do you ensure a strong authentication for that person? That you make sure that he in digital world through dual factor authentication, strong passwords, and so forth. But of course, first you need to determine actually who needs access to certain data, who needs access to certain digital assets as well. So privacy determines who needs access. And cybersecurity enforces that access through strong authentication. You can ask your technical team or anybody in your organizations whether they have answers to these questions. And if you need a screenshot of this webinar, take this screenshot and ask these questions to your team members. How many failed authentications had you had last month? Is anybody watching even? Maybe somebody is trying to break in to your applications or to your server every few seconds. So if your admin access open to public internet, be sure that hackers actually trying to break it for a long time already. So they're trying, and it's all automated, it's not manual. And that's why they actually can do it. They scan internet, they see what's open, and then automatically they start from their botnets or other infected servers bombarding your server and trying to break in. It doesn't cost them too much energy. After they break in, then already they will figure out how to use this information for their benefit. So it's important to watch for failed authentications. how many hacker requests landed on your web servers? Because if your web servers are open to a public, they're being a target for hackers. Doesn't matter how small business you are. From what we could see, actually, if you use shared web hosting, for example, those servers attack the most because they're the most vulnerable as well, because they have many ports open to a public internet. So if you think your web hosting provider protects you completely, well, you need to ask how are they protecting? Because there are a lot of variations. Security in general, it's not black and white. There are a lot of gray areas in security, and there's somebody doing better job than others. Even they might be working with the same cPanel web hosting. There are different ways of dealing with it. Some people can have a blocking rules. Some people are too lazy to work with blocking hackers. And because it creates a lot of problems for users also, if they, for example, failed on their password for mail, and your web server suddenly start blocking valid users, well, web hosting provider need to fix it, and it's a lot of trouble. If you don't implement brute force protection like this on failed authentication, hackers can unlimitedly keep bombarding your server, trying to break to your mail or FTP server. But you don't have trouble from real users who also forget their passwords. People have a lot of problems still with their passwords. Doesn't matter how many tools exist to solve this problem. People need to use it. How many malware was detected last month? For example, on your endpoints, your employees, they click on malicious links. Do you know how many times they click last month and how many malware they installed? So if nobody knows this data in your organization, well, you're in a blind. You're operating in the blind and you don't have a dashboards. So how many vulnerabilities does your infrastructure has? So you need to know your vulnerabilities before hackers discover them. Because hackers actually, they're much better in discovering your vulnerabilities than protective team usually. Because especially small organizations, they don't have a vulnerability scanners. On the market out there, there's dozens of vulnerability scanners available, but yet if you don't implement it, you don't engage with a managed security service provider who has those tools, well, you don't know your vulnerabilities. And it means it's very vulnerable, because if you never scanned, you didn't even know where you stand in terms of security. At least if you scan, you have result of the scan, you know what vulnerabilities, and then you can ignore it. You can say, well, looks like I have only medium vulnerabilities. I can accept the risk for this asset. It's fine. But that's already a risk management. It's not ignoring the risk at all. And risk assessment, of course, it's one of the first steps to identify the risks. How do you know if your computer already has been compromised and not controlled remotely? So all these questions, take a screenshot, ask your technical team whether they know it. Security is a journey. Holistic approach is needed to cybersecurity, from business requirements and regulations. So, and as a business owner, you determine those business requirements. And already a technical team later on can implement it, as we talked about backups. And whether you need to comply with some regulations, whether it's a GDPR or any other California privacy acts and other regulations you need to comply with. You need to understand those regulations. And what's your security maturity level? Can you gauge yourself even? If you understand where you stand right now in terms of security, that's again, it's already, you know where you are. And that's already a good starting point. Where you want to go in terms of security, that's another question. And that's already like depends on your investments into it. But in general, you spend on something and it's a cost savings. Because if you don't educate your employees, which is very cost effective, it means data breach is coming. Somebody is gonna, by mistake, mishandle the data. So it's usually a business balance between security, costs, and convenience. And how do you distribute security investments, and which measure do you implement first? That's where cybersecurity consulting and vCISO services. vCISO stands for Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. Big organizations, they hire those people, Chief Information Security Officers. But smaller and medium organizations, they cannot hire, they cannot afford this person because they cost so much. That's where vCISO service becomes more economical. You engage with a fractional CISO, you pay only fractional fees, and you get a benefit out of it, that risks start being managed. And each environment is different. Some people have servers, and businesses don't have servers. They have containers, VMs, serverless, you name it. And it's each organization, there are only certain standards which is applicable to organizations, but you still need to implement it within your organizations with its own specifics and risk appetite. Keeping your software up to date, it's important. Usually it's handled by either your IT guys or managed service providers, which includes a patch management where you just keep installing patches. That's what managed service providers and IT people keep doing all the time. You install one patch, in some time you need to install again, because new vulnerability has been discovered, new functionality being installed. But in terms of security, it's really about vulnerabilities being discovered by hackers, by security researchers, and you need to keep updating it. What's your malware strategy for your organization? Do you have an antivirus everywhere installed? And these days, it's not only antivirus, it's intrusion detection and response services. So, for example, it used to be antivirus only file-based scanning, where virus on your computer, they scan, they detect. Then it was behavior-based, where it's actually antivirus determines how program behaves and can block it, depends on its behavior. And what if, for example, a program like Box or Dropbox, if malicious attacker got hold of your computer, he's controlling it remotely, and instead of using your account for Dropbox, he just misconfigured it and configured that all data goes to his Dropbox account, and he stores it using a valid software, not malicious by intent, but he uses for malicious data. So intrusion detection is needed to detect cases like this. If you have servers, then log management and security information and event management systems comes into play. And you can have through those tools, SIEM tools, you can watch for authentication failures much better. And you can generate any reports from the logs you want, including from your intrusion detection systems, network firewalls. So it's becomes all visual and easy to track. Small organizations, they don't have a implemented SIEM, security event information management systems, because you need to pay a license, you need to implement it for your systems. Small organizations, they don't have a choice but to outsource it to manage security service providers. Big organizations, of course, they have internal staff and they can hire anybody, but small and medium organizations, they better outsource it, or you can see whether you can build it inside your organizations, which is a challenge. What's your vulnerability management program? Have you ever scanned your assets for vulnerabilities? There are plenty of tools out there to scan for vulnerabilities, but if you don't use them, what's the use? There's no benefit of it. And of course, whether you can purchase this tool internally for your organization, or once again, you can ask managed security service provider to scan it for you and give a result very economically and much cheaper than if you buy the tool inside the organization. And it's really all depends how many assets do you have inside your organization and how many people do you have? Do you have a needed expertise to do that? After you scan for vulnerabilities, of course, you understand where you stand, and then you decide whether you want to improve, patch things, close things. So it's already risk management starts there. About password management, I know people still struggle with passwords. Passwords are already almost obsolete. It needs to be complemented with dual factor authentication, where you use a SMS text to authenticate you, or you use a mobile authenticator app. So password in itself, it's already a weak form of authentication. Yet people just struggle with passwords and they don't have right tools, first of all, installed to manage their passwords, to help them at least. Some people have a personal barrier to use any password managers. And so I know it's a big problem still there. And we are trying to help educating people how to do that. But all the tools also exist there. Whether your organization have a single sign-on or not, where you sign in once and there is access to all your applications, it also depends. In malware management in general, there are a lot of vendors out there. And if you don't implement it, it is a risk management. I feel like different scenarios could be used, and in very few scenarios where you can afford not to implement it. But in general, it's malware or managed detection and response services. That's what you need to have. Whether you have encryption implemented on your servers, this is once again, it's all technical terms, and technical team can deal with this, but they need your guidance. They need your guidance. How much security do you want, or how much risk can you able to accept? Social engineering is psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. So if hackers cannot hack your server directly, for example, to steal the data, they hack your organization through human element, which is still the weakest link. It's fairly easy to trick some people. Some people are more robust to social engineering than others. And social engineering, it's type of confidence trick for the purpose of information gathering, fraud, or system access. Confidence trick is often one of many steps in more complex fraud schema. If somebody calls you by phone and pretend to be somebody from your bank, for example, you don't have a way to prove or disprove their identity. They can pretend to be from your wireless provider or from your insurance, and you can volunteer all the data to them, and there's identity theft involved, and data could be lost. So you better educate your employees to be a little bit more prepared for this. Because hackers, they can research who works in your organization and be very specifically targeting that person and with their messaging. Phishing is a subset of social engineering done through emails. You need to educate your helpers and employees how to not to get caught on phishing. You need to plan for incidents before they occur. It's if you're not ready and incidents happens, ransomware, you don't know where to start even. Whom do you call and so forth. So it is starts with identification, detection, containment stage, eradication and recovery of your systems, and you're trying to see what you have learned after the incident. So this policy need to written out, and all the involved parties need to be familiar with it. I said it again, but I'll say it. It doesn't matter how many solutions exist in cybersecurity market if current solutions are not implemented in your organization. Of course, it is a risk management, whether you should implement something or not, but some things cannot be ignored because the risks are much greater than involved costs. If you scan through your vulnerabilities, for example, it doesn't cost much. And at least you would know where you stand. And then already you can choose not to fix anything because you accept the risk, you understand, at least you understand the risks. And I feel like in security market in general, there are so many solutions exist right now. And most of the solutions already have been created. They just need to be properly implemented within organizations. Another statement that small organizations are greatly can benefit of cost savings to outsource cybersecurity for managed security service providers, because they have the right tools already, they have the right expertise on their stuff, and it's a very economical way, and it's very hard to imagine very small organization building their own security operational center. They barely have a couple of IT guys who might not be knowledgeable in security, because security usually comes above regular operations. One of the things you need to understand, it's a difference between MSSP, Managed Security Service Providers, versus Managed Service Providers. What's the difference? These are two organizations, and one organization could cover both functions. You can create and have it, of course, within your organizations, those departments. You don't have to outsource everything. And it all depends on your scale. If you're a big, large organization, you can hire anybody inside, and you have from help desk to security operations, all working for you directly as employees, not as contractors. But small and medium-sized businesses, it's financially economical outsource it. So managed security service providers, they usually concentrate on network operational center, where the things are working and information is available. They're remotely monitoring your assets, whether it's server or laptops. They provide help desk services, IT management, on-site service. So it's basically to make sure that your organization is functioning with all its digital assets needed. Managed security service providers, they have a cybersecurity focus to them. They have instead of network operational center where you just monitor the things are working, you actually have a security operational center where you track fail authentications, you track for intrusions to your network, to your servers. They have a security event information management system, which provides capabilities for easy tracking and alerting and correlation of alerts. They have security analysts who using those systems. They're ready for any incident response. They're trained in this. They're producing threat intelligence. They go threat hunting. So it's more security focus. They do vulnerability scanning for you and prepare you. So you choose your strategy. This is a generic one of the possible use of managed security service providers, that they do intrusion detection, security event and information management systems. They manage your firewall, vulnerability assessment, and so forth. Hopefully it gives you some frameworks, and hopefully you learned something at this webinar. It doesn't stop, we cannot cover everything. And in case you feel like you need help, feel free to reach out to us. Happy to help. Thank you for attending.